YouTube, and we are live on Facebook as well. Hello, shalom, and welcome to our friends on Zoom as well. Okay, dear friends, welcome to our discussion today. As you know, every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, we delve into getting better at being you. And this week is a continuation, although it is a stand-alone class. So if you didn't catch last week's class, I'm going to catch up a little bit and you can delve more into it, but it's okay because you're going to figure out from today's class exactly what needs to be done. So the topic is it love or is it obsession? And last week we went into some detail about an obsessive, unhealthy relationship and what that looks like. And let's just spend a few moments, with your permission, trying to define an obsessive, unhealthy relationship. And then, of course, we've got to move on to what a good, healthy love relationship is really all about. And that's going to be the core work we're going to work on today. And yes, it is my birthday. Thank you all for wishing me happy birthday. There's no better way that I love to spend my birthday than teaching beautiful Torah ideas to people online. Okay, maybe lying on a beach with a pina colada, but we'll save that for another time. Right now, I have 2 feet of snow outside my front door. Okay, so let's talk about obsession just for a few moments. Just so we have the contrast, the context, the picture of what unhealthy is, and then we're going to figure out what the healthy version is. So what is an obsessive relationship? So we defined it last week as your mind being dominated, obsessed with feelings and persistent ideas, images, or desires. And in a relationship, it's a person who is enmeshed. They have no independent self. They are compulsively focused on taking care of another person, thinking they're helping them, which they're not. And eventually, they themselves will benefit from this, which they won't. That, in a nutshell, my friends, is an obsessive relationship. Now, that could be a friendship. It could be with a parent. Right? I've seen obsessive relationship with people and their children, definitely with spouses, boyfriend, girlfriends, employers, employees. By the way, you could even have someone you never met before, right? A movie star, yeah? Or a singer. These are all can take the form of an obsessive, unhealthy relationship. And the expression I hear said a lot about this is someone else is living in your head 24/7 rent-free. Nobody wants that. Right? You don't want someone living in your head, you're obsessing about them, and they're going about their life and being successful in their relationships, and you're stuck in this obsessive world of relationship. That's not good and that's not healthy. Where do these obsessions come from, and what are the characteristics of them? So we don't know, right? Maybe people are born with this, maybe through a failed caregiver in your childhood, right? That could be the trigger that led to it. There's some dysfunction that a person had, maybe through birth itself, some kind of dysfunction that has led to you becoming obsessed with this idea, this thought, this person, and not being able to disassociate yourself, disconnect yourself from this unhealthy individual. I know people, I speak to people all the time. Just yesterday, I had 2 such conversations with people. I had a guy who spoke to me last night in a relationship he was in 3 years ago. It finished 3 years ago, and he still hadn't managed to remove from his mind. This girl now is married with a child. And he's asked me whether he should reach out to this girl to talk about the feelings he has for her. I told him straight up that he must not, under any circumstances, reach out to this ex-girlfriend who is now married with a child. That is the worst thing he can do. I said it's not going to help her at all, and it's not going to help himself. Okay, this is obsession. It's fantasy. It's this Prince Charming idea, or in this case, Princess Charming, that all my problems will be solved. The problem is with him. And unfortunately, it affected and has affected a lot of the relationships he's been with ever since. That, my friends, is a classic example of obsession. Okay? So we spoke last week as well about 3 characteristics of an obsessive relationship. And as we're going to see today, by undoing these 3, that's where a good, healthy relationship comes from. Number 1, as I said, we said assigning too much time and value to a partner. Okay? This is a disproportionate amount of time, attention, and value to other people. This always leads to eventual disappointment. Okay? By the way, it could even be a guru, right? A therapist or a rabbi, and the people become obsessed with, okay? And it ends up eating up themselves, right? And they try harder and harder to manipulate the other person to live up to the mental images they have of them. That's why many, many famous people go absolutely cuckoo, right? Because they can't live up to this image that people put in them. But then again, it's just demion. It doesn't even exist. It's imagination. Number two is they put unrealistic expectations for unconditional positive love. Nobody, as we're going to see today, can give you unconditional positive love. You can love other people, you can help them, but there's a limit, right? We are finite beings. We have finite abilities, right? It's impossible to give too much of ourselves, right? By giving too much of ourselves, we deplete ourselves. And number three, a characteristic of an obsessive relationship is neglecting to care for yourself. When I say neglecting, we spoke last week how the neglect could come through physically neglecting yourself. I see people who just stop taking care of themselves, physically, exercise, diet, health, emotionally, mentally, not taking care of themselves. Just their entire life ends up being wrapped up in this obsessive, unrealistic fantasy relationship of this other person. And again, it could be this person they know. It could be a family member. It could be a guru. It could be a therapist. It could be anybody. All right? It's not about them. It's about you. And that's the key over here. Okay? And these people live in fear. People in obsession. Hear me well, my friends. This is so important. These people we're talking about, these people live in fear. The love obsessed, they fear abandonment. Maybe they were abandoned as a child. I mean, we all feel abandoned to some degree, right? By families or friends. Everyone goes through that, right? But they fear abandonment because they were abandoned, so they want to cling on to this person. They're not clinging on, they're clinging on to the idea of this person that they're going to come and they're going to make everything right. They're going to take care of me, and all my problems are going to go away as soon as Prince Charming turns up on his white horse, jumps off it, and he's going to give me the kiss of life. It's going to wake me up, and we're going to ride off into the distant sunset together. It's complete nonsense. And living in that world, although it does release endorphins into our heads and our minds, it does no good. No good. So this fear of abandonment, and many people are going to, I've seen people tolerate crazy relationships and insane marriages, all right, of emotional, physical abuse sometimes, psychological abuse, just don't leave me, right? And it takes time to unmesh from this relationship. They also, we said, have a fear of intimacy. I'm not talking only about physical intimacy, but also emotional intimacy. It's always a surface relationship. I know people who date or married for years, and they'll say to me, I never really knew my partner. It may sound insane, but that's a clear sign of an obsessive relationship. Okay, if you want more about that, do please watch part 1 of this series of the various 8 steps of an obsessive relationship. But today, since it's my birthday, let's talk about the positive. What does a positive, healthy love relationship look like? What are we striving for? In work, in friendships, in marriage, in dating, whatever it is. They're all the same. Love is love is love. It's all the same. So number 1 is our partner does not fill in any missing pieces of ourselves. You see, people feel as though I get into a relationship and this person's going to help me be a better me. To some degree, that's true. They have that potential. But they're not going to fill you up if you're missing something. If there's something missing in you, if there's a part of your personality, there's part of your psyche, if there's a part of your psychological makeup that is lacking, don't think this person is going to enter your life and fix it. Don't think that being in this better relationship, this friendship, this business with this partner is going to fix all of my problems. If you do think that, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And unfortunately, you're going to be too far down the line in order to fix that situation. You know, in Hebrew, the word, we want to have shalom bayit. We want peace in our homes. Right? There's an old joke I always tell. How do you have shalom bayit? My wife asks me for something. I buy it. I have shalom. Thank you so much. I'll be here all night. But the word shalom comes from the word, not peace, shalem, which means complete, whole. if you want to be in a healthy, love, peaceful relationship, you need to be shalom. You need to be shalem. That's where it comes from. Don't think that I've got a piece missing in me and this person's going to fill it up. I am shalem. My partner is shalem. Whatever partner you're talking about, we now create a new shlemut. We help each other. And really, relationships are there to help us discover parts of ourselves that needs to be worked on. I'm not dismissing that. Don't need to be perfect before you enter a business relationship, into a family relationship. We're all chaser, we're all lacking. But ultimately, a love relationship is I am shalem in upon myself. And we are able to develop, and this is so important, my friends, self-love, self-protection, self-awareness, self-care, and self-containment. Okay? You know, the Vilna Gaon, right? Which literally means the genius of Vilna, which is a pretty good title for the Jewish people to give a person, right? If we have among Jews someone who's called the genius, he must have been pretty smart. And he says, he's talking about the context of marriage, but as we say, all relationships are considered under this title. He says that husband and wife are trying to create an emotional bond between them strong enough to make them feel two parts of a whole. That means each part is a whole and not half a part. We think we're two halves of a whole. We're not. We're both whole. We're both shalem, and now we're connecting two wholes to create something new. And the same can be said in any relationship, any friendship. We're both whole, and we're trying to become more. There's an interesting question, which is, we know the Torah tells us in Leviticus chapter 18, that 19, that we're looking to create a love in ourselves. Okay, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You have to love other people like you love yourself. We've said before that if you don't love yourself, you can't love other people. I mean, that's the equation. It doesn't just say love other people and period, end of story. Love a bit like you love yourself. Because if you don't love yourself, if there's no self-love and self-care, and you haven't worked on yourself, then that is going to project on every other relationship you are in. If you haven't fixed yourself, if you haven't been through your own spiritual, emotional, psychological journey, every other relationship you're going to be in is going to fail. Inevitably, it's not going to work. And we said how the Torah can command an emotion to love, because in the end, love is an emotion. It comes from the heart, not always the brain. We try to get the brain involved as much as possible, but it's an emotional connection. And we said how the word for love we mentioned before many times is ahava, we said. And ahava comes from the root hav, which means to give. So if you give of yourself, you will love other people. How do you generate love? Through giving. Many people try to generate love through taking, right? If he took me here and she treats me better, and if you did that for me, and it's all about me, all right? And we all get into that zone in our relationships, our friendships, our parenting, right? That if you take care of me, then I'm going to love you. Otherwise, I'm not. But we're flipping that on its head. We're saying it's actually a 180 from that. If you give somebody else, you love them. In other words, love follows the giving. If I give somebody something, I love them. That's why the Gemara says that a mother will always love a child more than the child loves the mother, right? Because children are naturally, we all are naturally takers. They come into this world with their hands closed, right? Because they take. That's why we need to get our children and teach them how to give from as early as possible. Otherwise, we're going to create disgusting, spoiled brats. And they're going to take that into the rest of their lives, and into their business relationships, and into their families, and into their spousal relationships, and we're going to end up with a big problem. A big problem. Okay, it all starts very, very early. So we want to teach children, but all of us, because we're all just big kids, you know that already, to become givers. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's why Rabbi Dessler, a great rabbi who lived through the Second World War, speaks about this in a very famous essay, which I highly recommend. It's a short essay, but a beautiful, on loving kindness, that if you want to generate love in yourself, you have to give. And he says that's why we come to this world with our hands closed, because we're naturally takers, but we all leave this world with our hands open after a lifetime of giving. So how do you generate self-love? You give. You give to yourself. And how do you generate love for others? You give to them. You don't take from them. Sometimes you got to take, but that's not going to do much, right? That's not going to do much, okay? So the mother's going to love the child because she's giving the child. Actually, he tells a very interesting story, which some say is actually autobiographical story, this Rabbi Dessler who I just quoted. During the Second World, I don't think I've told the story before in a while. During the Second World War, he was separated from his wife, right? Something happened and they ended up escaping and went two different directions. We're not sure how it happened exactly, but it happened. He ended up in England and she was stuck somewhere in Europe, and they were separate, and his child ended up with him, just the way things worked out. And they couldn't see each other. And eventually after the war, amazingly his wife survived and they reunited after the war in 1945. And he talks in an essay about how his relationship with his son was extremely strong. But his wife kept telling him that there was a problem with her relationship with the child. And why was that? And she was very disturbed by this. And he says, don't be disturbed by it. You see, for the past 5 years, I've been the one who's always, obviously the child loves you, but you didn't give the child. And therefore your relationship with the child, not just from the child, but from your perspective has been affected. And the only way to fix that is to give to the child. Because the more you give, the more you love. Right? How you receive love is directly connected to how much you give out. Okay? So a healthy relationship is not based upon obsession or compulsion. Okay? Relationship cannot thrive on positive or negative intensity. It's too much. You know, I hear this expression a lot nowadays, love bombing. Right? That a person just love bombing. It sounds nice. Who doesn't want to be bombed by love? Right? Actually, to me, it sounds terrible. Right? It's unhealthy. It's just too much. It's just way, way too much. A healthy relationship is when you're able to nurture others in a way which promotes their emotional and spiritual growth and promotes them taking responsibility for themselves. That's what this is about. Okay? The obsessive relationship, right? The codependent relationship, as it's called, that's the technical term, is when one person ends up constantly taking care of the other person, no matter how bad they are. Right? The classic scenario is the alcoholic. Let's just say husband for all intents and purposes, but it could be child, parent, wife, makes no difference. And the alcoholic, and he's always drunk and he's not there for the kids, and he makes his wife call into work and she's cleaning up the sick after him and all the mess and all the alcohol and all the broken relationships. Ironically, she's crying for him to get better. But the weird part is, and this is where things become unbelievable, but I've seen it too many times, she says she wants him to get better from his alcoholism because her life is a wreck, right? Money and family and everything, and his job is just terrible. But secretly, unbeknownst to her, she doesn't want him to get better because her entire value is based upon her taking care of him and his illness. Sounds weird and almost counterintuitive, and it is, right? But that's a codependent relationship. Her entire value now is not based upon herself, because she's lost all sense of self, because all she does is take care of him and his insanity. I've seen this in many different ways, happen to many different people. That people lose their sense of self, become enmeshed, and their entire life now ends up being taken care of this other person and their terrible dysfunction, right? Whether it's alcohol or drugs or affairs or whatever it is. And it's very interesting when it talks about Yitzhak marrying Rivka, one of the few marriages that are spoken about in the Torah. It talks about Isaac and Rebecca. And it says that Yitzhak married Rebecca, and then she became his wife, and then he loved her. And the rabbis point out that this is a very unusual order. What does that mean that he married her, and then she became his wife, and then he loved her? It's actually back to front. Shouldn't you first of all fall in love, and then become each other's wives, right? And then marry each other. Meaning, what does the marry mean? They actually married. They created this thing called marriage, this monogamous relationship between each other. What has become his wife? That's the intimacy, physical intimacy and emotional intimacy that was between them. And then they fell in love. See, many people today will do the exact opposite. First of all, they'll fall in love with the person. Many times with the idea of this person they'll fall in love with. Then they'll become emotionally intimate, bad order to do things in, and finally they get married. It's a very dangerous game to play, right? Notice the Torah puts love at the end. First of all, I've got to think with a clear head, what am I getting into? Who am I going to fall in love with? Many people just fall in love. Oh, I'm in love. They'll just throw it out there. One date. Oh, I found my one. 3 days, I'm in love. And then very quickly it turns out to be not so good. I have many people who come to me after one date and say, oh, we were together and it was an amazing first date. We were up all night and we were talking all night. We have so much in common and that's fantastic. And I don't say it, but I think to myself, probably not going to happen, this relationship. It sounds insane, right? And they just told me how amazing everything is. How the first date was so magical. We have so much in common, right? We share the same name for our dogs, right? And I know her psychiatrist or whatever it is, right? We'll find 1,000 of these coincidences pull us together. And I'm like, See, once you reach that point of relationship, the only way is down. But if a couple meet and I'm like, how was it? And she's like, it's all right. It's not so bad. I'll see him again. I'm like, ooh, we have potential for some long-term relationship over here. Because at that point, you can only go up. So obsessive relationships become love at first sight. They become too compulsive, too quick. If I find someone who's been dating someone for 3-4 dates and becomes obsessed with them and becomes emotionally broken at the breakup, the problem is not the breakup of the relationship, the problem is with them, right? That's the problem. First of all, you get married, then there's intimacy, and then eventually come love. Love comes later once giving has been involved. So real love, we're saying, starts with love of you. And most people, it's going to sound crazy, don't love themselves. Many people actually despise themselves, right? And they'll act in that way and they'll treat themselves terribly, physically terribly, whether it's not taking care of their physical health or their eating or their exercise, right? That's a sign of self-loathing, okay? And that's a problem. And the Torah tells us very clearly when Hillel was asked by a potential convert to teach him the entire Torah, standing on one foot. Shammai, a different school of thought, didn't like that, kicked him out, said you can't summarize Judaism on one foot, i.e. one message. But Hillel answered him and gave him a real message. And by the way, Hillel is the one that we follow in Halacha most of the time. We are Hillel people. That's why that's why you always find a Hillel house on university campuses. You don't find a Shammai house. What did Hillel say? What you don't like being done to you, don't do to other people, which is the opposite side of saying the same thing. Love others like you love yourself. And he says, Rabbi Akiva said, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. Inside that one message is everything you need to know about being Jewish. Every mitzvah, right, is about, if you don't like it, don't do it to others. If you do like it, do it for other people. That's basically Zeh klal gadol b'Torah, right? The very famous statement of Rabbi Akiva. That means it's a general principle that all the other mitzvot, or most of them, are going to fall under. You may not always see it, right? You don't see how eating a piece of matzah is making you a loving person. You may see it by giving charity. You may not see that leaving your field fallow in Israel for Shemitah does it, but it's doing that as well. It does that as well. This is a principle that takes everything. Okay, let's get a bit more specific now. Loving relationships. Don't take criticism too personally. This is so important, okay? And I myself am a victim of this with my personality, so I'm always watching out for this, right? I know people. I'm dealing now with a young woman who has become famous for not so good reasons, not her fault, but something happened to her, totally out of control, and there's stuff in the news about her. I'm talking international news about this woman. So we're in daily contact. I can't tell you more of that, but I'm being absolutely serious. And she's making a terrible mistake. She's reading the comments on the news articles in the international press. I said, that's got to stop, okay? Because people are criticizing her. Again, she did nothing wrong, okay? But she has a certain lifestyle that people, I think, are jealous of, or just some people want to hate and criticize. There's some people, as you know. Now, what you should do with these people, as I mentioned before, is you just stay away from them. If able, just cut it off. But there's some people who just love to criticize. Some of them are narcissistic, and that's all they do, right? We said one of the key traits of a narcissist is constant and persistent criticism of others. But some people just love to criticize because it's fun and makes them feel good and superior for those few moments. Personally, I cannot stand those people, and I just stay away from them. Right? There's people in my synagogue, right, in my community, who whenever you talk to them, they're always criticizing you. That doesn't make you feel good. They don't do it to make you feel good. They make it to themselves feel superior. You stay away from them. But the key is, because you can't always get away from it, that is to stay away from such people and don't take it personally. I mentioned this story before. I'm going to say it again. I'll say it again. I was on an elevator One Passover, I'm a rabbi at a program for a number of years, and I brushed against a woman's arm while exiting the elevator. And she screamed, ow! Oh my God, that really hurt! And I thought to myself, come on, get a life. I just touched your arm. Right? What was all that about? Take it easy. I literally just like brushed against it. It was a packed elevator. This is pre-COVID, by the way. So before you start criticizing me, we were all packed in the elevator. Later on, I saw her at dinner. She came over to me. She said, I want to apologize for my overreaction. But see, what happened is I got sunburnt on my arm. And you just touched it and it triggered it off. And a revelation came to me, which I've shared before and I'll share again. Everybody has emotional sunburn somewhere on their body, and you're going to touch it and they're going to explode. Don't take it personally. Just like if you're holding a young baby, you know, babies have very sharp fingernails, right? Maybe little mittens on their baby's hands, they don't scratch themselves. Imagine a little baby you're holding so cute and scratches you in the face. Would you get angry with the baby? Of course not. It's a baby, for goodness, it doesn't know what it's doing. Most people are big babies. I'm not saying you have to excuse their behavior, but that's the way you have to look at it. Some people are just big babies. You've touched a part of their personality. You triggered something from their childhood, and that's all you're saying. Don't take it too personally. Okay? The sages say, this is a Gemara in Baba Kama, if someone calls you a donkey, don't take it personally. Put a saddle on your back. Isn't that a great statement from the Gemara? Only the Jews come up with such a statement. If someone calls you a donkey, don't take it personally, fine. Just put a saddle on your back, fine. I'm a donkey. I'm an idiot. Okay? This takes time and effort, especially in a world where criticism has become so easy to give and easy to read. Don't take it personally. And in relationships, healthy love relationships are that too as well. Also, don't blame. Healthy love relationships, right? Healthy relationship, we don't blame each other. Now, I do it a lot, all right? We do this naturally. And we see that the first ever sin of Adam and Eve, right? The first married couple, if you will, from the Garden of Eden, they got into that mess because they blamed each other. Remember the story? Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden. God says, don't eat from the tree. She goes and eats from the tree. And then she persuades Adam to do as well. God says, what did you do? He blames her. She blames the snake. They both get kicked out. The rabbis say that had they not blamed each other, had they just said, yeah, sorry, I messed up. Nothing to do with her. It's my fault. She said, nothing to do with the snake. It was my free will that did it. Had they not given blame to others, to people, or to experiences, right, or to ideas like the snake represented, they would never have been kicked out of Gan Eden, and it would all still be there. Blame, giving blame to other people, which we all naturally do. As we said, that is the condition of mankind. Putting blame on other people is a problem, okay? And hand in hand with blaming comes ingratitude, not being grateful for what you have. And Adam didn't show Hakarat Hatov, gratitude for Eve, okay? And he blamed her. And he says, I didn't ask for her. She was your idea. She'd maybe do it, and it's your fault. He ends up blaming God. Not a good idea. What do we want to do? So healthy love relationships, unlike obsessive ones, involve boundaries, but not walls. There's a difference between a boundary, which is open to movement and interaction, but not walls. And when I say not walls, I see people in relationships who, someone's asked me, what's the opposite of love? What's the opposite of love? And many people say hate. It's not true. Hate is not the opposite of love. If I'm sitting with a couple and she says, oh, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. And he says, I hate her, I hate her, I hate her. I think to myself, oh, there's room for improvement. Right now it's hate, but at least there's communication. At least they're expressing it. No, the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy, indifference. If they haven't spoken to each other in 6 months, let alone argue, it's done. Right? It's like a fish, Rabbi Akiva. You see a fish inside the water, it's quiet, it's fantastic. That's a live fish. But when it's out, it's flapping around. You're like, oh, now it's alive. Now it's really alive. Like, no, it's about to die. Okay? Right? A sign of flapping, a sign of movement, of struggle is a sign of life. That's a loving relationship. Okay? You want boundary. Once a wall's put down, once we're not communicating, once that's over, it's done. And many people react that way. Right? Some people flee and some people fight. Okay, both come with their own challenges, but at least better to be in the relationship. Okay, with a wall, you can't even do that. Obviously, when it comes to obsessive relationships, everyone's trying to control other people. I've spoken about this before so many times. You cannot control or change anyone else. You can get an immediate control, right? You can put a gun to someone's head and say, if you don't do this, you're in trouble. But you can't hold a gun to someone's head forever. You can force your kids to do stuff, right, and threaten them. But at some point, you aren't going to have control of your kids. At some point, they grow up and do whatever the heck they want. So if you don't figure this out earlier on, it's not going to be okay. Okay, and trying to control other people comes in various forms, right? We shout at people, we get angry, we use physical violence, or we use the classic Jewish mother thing, which we've become experts in, and that is guilt. Guilt is a great form of control which doesn't work, right? Short term, you get a result, but not long term. So all these are not signs of a healthy love relationship. Okay, right? My mother used to say to me, every mother said to every child, right? What do they say? Eat your dinner. Why? There's people starving in, well, when I was a kid, it was in Biafra or Africa, right? Now, wherever they say nowadays, right? So I used to be chutzpahdik, and I would say, well, put it in an envelope and mail it to them, I was a kid, right? So guilt doesn't work as a form of relationship building, no matter how satisfying it may feel. And controlling anger, of course, we've spoken about anger many, many times, right? Anger is compared to idol worship, right? In Judaism, we look down upon anger. We all get angry sometimes. We all lose it. I always lose it. But there's someone who lives a life of anger, of kas. It's compared to idol worship. Why idol worship? Why would the Gemara compare anger to idol worship? And actually, the Gemara also calls anger the inner teacher. What are you getting angry about? You're going to learn something about yourself by watching what gets you angry. Okay? Anger is considered the inner teacher, but it's also like idol worship because you're ascribing powers to things outside, okay, of God. By doing this, right, I get angry because I don't accept that fact that this torment, this challenge came to me from God. Number 9 is don't let your love be dependent on things. It's actually a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, that says if your love is dependent on a specific thing, when that thing goes away, the love goes away. If your love for your partner is based upon their good looks, eventually their looks if it's based on their money, eventually the money goes away or becomes irrelevant. If it's dependent on something, right? True love, right, has to be based upon emotional closeness and true friendship, right? Not on obsession that this person is going to fix all of my problems, okay? And that's why Maimonides, in his commentary on Pirkei Avot, says superficial motivations create only temporary results. A lot of what we do create temporary results, and we want long-term love relationship. I've never performed a wedding of a couple where they stood on the chuppah and said, I'd like to be married for 1 year. Right? They never say that. Hopefully they don't think it. Right? We want to be married a long term. We want the relationship to go on forever. Okay? See, physical things dissipate. Right? The desire for food comes and goes, right? But the emotion of love that is based upon temporary need, says Maimonides, is eventually going to disappear. So you better figure out why you're getting involved in this love relationship. Yep. I'll tell you a beautiful idea. You know, there's a beautiful custom which we still do. I mean, I perform many weddings, Baruch Hashem, maybe 150 of them, that the Chatan looks at the color. The groom looks at the bride. Why? Because there was a story in history of Jacob and Rachel. And Jacob, it says, loved Rachel, but she was the younger sister. And his father-in-law, Lavan, right, who was also his uncle, said, you know what? I have another older daughter. And he did the old switcheroo. Okay? So since then, you must see your husband or wife before you marry them. Right? And that means you have to see that you are physically attracted to them. That is a mitzvah. That's an obligation, right? You may have, blind dating, but there's no blind marriage. In some cultures, they are. You get to meet your wife under the chuppah for the first time. That may make for great reality TV, but it doesn't make for great reality. Terrible and asur. He must see his wife before they get married. So how did he marry Rachel? So we know he had to work for 7 years. for 7 years. Now, because he loved her so much, right, it says the years went by very, very quickly. And it says to him, that to him, says the Torah, yamim ka'achadim. It was like a few days. He loved her so much, anticipated this relationship, and it was a real, true, healthy love, that the time went very, very quickly. That's a good sign of a love relationship. Time goes quickly. The rabbis ask a beautiful question. Actually, I heard this from, I'll quote one of my great rabbis who unfortunately died this past Sunday, Rabbi Abraham Twersky, Zecher Tzadik Levracha. And he actually, when I spoke to him, he gave me this beautiful interpretation. He says, why does it say Yamim Achadim? To Jacob, it seemed like a few days that he was married. Why does it say Yamim Muatim? That's how you say a little bit, Ma'at. Why Yamim Achadim? Achadim means one. It seemed like one. What does that mean? It means that in this relationship, in the challenging parts of this relationship, he took it one day at a time. That's how he got through the challenges. He didn't enmesh himself into his wife. He took the struggles and didn't dump them on her or blame Lavan for his problems. He took it upon himself one day at a time. That's why it says the 7 years he worked for his wife Rachel were Yamim Achadim and not Yamim Mu'atim. They seem like a short amount of time. He took it one day at a time. It was tough, but he took every struggle one day at a time. And therefore, each one of us has to see our love relationship, whether it's business or work or whatever, right, with truth. That's why the word for sexual intimacy in Hebrew is yediyah, knowledge. Whenever you see the word yediyah, knowledge, being mentioned, there is some intimacy, and between spouses in the Torah, it means physical sexual intimacy. And it comes from the word knowledge. You've got to know and understand, right? You go from head to heart, not from heart to head, right? How many failed relationships have I seen of people who get emotionally involved and then their brains kick in and they're like, oh my goodness, what happened over there? Yeah, so many times. And they always say to me when the relationship fails, which in many cases it eventually will, they'll be like, I wish I would have thought more. I just got too emotionally involved too early on. You don't want to make that mistake. Okay? So partners take responsibility for their own personal growth and don't blame other people. Okay? And the answer is you can both negotiate and accept compromise. There's a beautiful idea. I mentioned this in my mezuzah class. You see, the mezuzah in many homes, not everyone has this custom, they'll put the mezuzah at an angle. Why at an angle? So it's very weird, right? The Gemara gives two opinions how you meant to put your mezuzah. One opinion is you put it straight up, right? The other opinion is you put it bent like that. Now, usually when there's a machloket, an argument to the Gemara, you pick one side. It either goes straight up or it goes like that. But they do something which neither suggested. And then as you put it at the angle. No one says put it at an angle. They say do it straight or down. Why are you choosing a third option? Because the third option is a compromise of the first two, which is put it at an angle. Well, why are we doing that when we never seem to do that, as far as I know? Anyone else to do usually take one opinion and that's it. And the answer is because before you enter into your home, you got to realize the key to success is compromise. So the mezuzah is put at an angle so that you realize before you walk into a home, if I want this to work, this is my opinion, this is his or her opinion, right? This is the kid's opinion. There's a compromise over here. Compromise isn't what either wanted originally, but that's what a compromise is. It's that angle, okay? Do you want to be right, or do you want to do the right thing? That's the decision people have to make in healthy love relationships, okay? And a lot of that comes down to good and healthy communication, right? Because that's really what every relationship is all about. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. May we all celebrate together. Thank you for joining me on my birthday. Please go and have a drink. If you're over 21, you can have some wine. Make a l'chaim for me. Wishing you all a fantastic and successful week. Thank you.
Happy birthday.